The room smelled like lemon and fear. Machines blinked beside my bed. My body felt heavy, like stones were tied to my arms. I opened my eyes and saw Mark standing over me with a crooked smile. His voice was low but sharp. "Evelyn," he whispered, "you should know something. Emily is richer than you now. She'll take care of me the way you never could." He chuckled and shook his head. "Imagine that. My mistress is richer than my own wife." His words cut like knives. I tasted salt and metal in my mouth. I tried to speak, but the oxygen tube rubbed my lip. He leaned closer, enjoying the power. "Don't worry," he said. "You can rest. Emily and I have plans, real plans, smart plans. We're done pretending we need you." I turned my head to the window, watched light touch the long white curtains, and felt a heat rise in my chest. I had been quiet for years, gentle for years, humble for years, but something inside me stood up, even though my body could not. My voice came out soft but steady. "Mark," I said, "please call the nurse and ask her to bring my bag." He frowned. "For what?" "For the envelope inside it." He rolled his eyes. "You're not making sense." "Please," I said, keeping my voice calm. "It is important." He sighed. "Fine, but it won't change anything." The nurse came in, checked the monitors, and handed me my small grey bag. My hands trembled as I opened the zipper. I pulled out a sealed envelope with my name printed in gold. Mark crossed his arms. "What is this?" "Your knitting club receipts." I slid my finger under the seal and took out a single page. It was a letter from the bank. It had numbers, many numbers, and signatures. My breath was slow and even. "Mark," I said, "read it." He laughed. "I'm not reading your little notes." "Read it." I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. He snatched the page and scanned the lines. The color left his face. His mouth opened, then closed. He read it again, slower this time. He whispered the numbers like a prayer he could not finish. $750 million. My name, my trust, my control. I watched the shape of his pride fall onto the floor like a broken glass. The door swung open before he could speak. Footsteps, a new shadow, and with that shadow came a storm of truth I had kept locked away for years. And that is where the moment froze, where you lean forward, where the world holds its breath, because the next words would change everything we thought we knew. Before that day, people saw me as quiet. They saw a plain woman who wore soft sweaters and carried a book in her purse. They saw hands that made soup and wrote thank you notes. They did not see the hours before dawn when I read financial statements. They did not see the risks I took in silence. They did not see the storms I learned to sail alone. I grew up in a small town where the road to school turned muddy when it rained. My mother, a nurse with a warm laugh, taught me two things. "Be kind," she said, "because kindness is the only medicine you can give without a license. And pay attention, because people tell you who they are if you listen long enough." My father, a mechanic with big, patient hands, taught me two more. "Fix what you can reach," he said, "and save what you can't spend." We didn't have much, but we had enough. Enough to buy one new book a month, enough to keep the fridge humming, enough to fill the church pantry when it was empty. I was the quiet girl who stayed after class to stack chairs. I watched how the coach talked to the star players and how the janitor talked to no one. I saw who picked up trash and who dropped it. I noticed teachers who used soft voices that cut deeper than shouts. I learned to see. In college, I studied numbers because numbers do not lie. People lie, feelings lie, fear lies, but numbers stand there, honest and stubborn. I took a job after graduation at a small startup, fixing broken spreadsheets and answering phones. When the company ran out of cash, I asked the founder to let me try something. "Give me the vendor list," I said. "Let me renegotiate." He laughed at first. Then he let me do it. I saved the company $30,000 in 2 weeks. When we finally made a profit, the founder shook my hand and said, "You saved us." I shook my head. "No," I said. "Kindness saved you. You paid your bills when you could, and people remembered." That became my rule. Build trust like a wall, one honest brick at a time. I met Mark at a friend's wedding. He was handsome and tall with a smile that could fill a room. He made everyone laugh that night. He made me feel seen. He liked how I listened. I liked how he dreamed. We married 2 years later in a small garden with yellow roses and a violinist who played just slightly too fast. At first, Mark was kind. He brought me tea in the mornings and left sticky notes with hearts on the fridge. He told me my calm made him brave. I believed him. I wanted to. But little things began to shift. He lost a job and blamed his boss. He made a risky trade and blamed the market. If the soup was too salty, he blamed the salt shaker. My mother's lesson whispered in my ear, people tell you who they are if you listen long enough. I built my work quietly, away from noise and pictures. I invested in small companies that made useful things. Medical gloves, water filters, software that helped hospitals schedule nurses. I chose founders who told the truth, even when it hurt. I forced no headlines. I liked being the person no one noticed. We didn't talk about money at home. Mark liked expensive watches and weekends in places where the water was the color of a new sky. I didn't argue. I let him feel tall. I kept saving. I kept building. Then came the night of the accident, the night that pushed everything to the edge. It was late October. The trees had turned the color of fire. I was driving home from a late meeting when a truck slid through a red light. I saw it coming, a gray shark in rain. I turned the wheel. The world spun, glass scattered like stars. When I woke, I was in the hospital with tubes and beeping and pain that spoke its own rough language. The doctors said I would heal if I rested. They said my body needed time. They said I had been lucky. Mark visited that first night and held my hand. He kissed my forehead and called me his brave girl. He brought flowers, big ones, the kind that look expensive. I closed my eyes and believed we were still a team. But days have a way of pulling truth into the open. On the third day, he came in late with his shirt wrinkled and the smell of a new perfume clinging to him. He pulled out his phone and smiled at it, like it was a mirror that loved him back. When I asked him how he was sleeping, he shrugged. "Emily thinks I worry too much," he said softly, almost to himself. The way he said her name told me more than he wanted it to. I did not fight. I rested. I listened. Nurses talk. Hallways carry sound. A friend of a friend posted a photo, Mark at a rooftop bar, head tilted toward a woman with red lipstick, their shoulders touching. I stared at the screen and felt, not rage, but a deep, steady sadness, the kind that makes you want to hold a stranger's hand just to remember you are here. I thought of my mother. Be kind. Pay attention. I paid attention. The hospital security cameras showed Mark arriving close to midnight, leaving before dawn. He was always tired when he came in the morning. He was always busy when my doctor asked to speak with both of us. When he did talk to me, he spoke in half sentences. He said things like, "You'll be fine, and I've got meetings, and don't stress." But on the 6th day, he leaned over my bed and told me about Emily being richer. He told me with a smile, standing on a little hill he thought I could not climb. He told me a story where I was the small one and he was the winner. That is when I asked for the envelope, the letter I kept for moments when people forgot who I was. I had built a trust over 10 years. I had sold a software company quietly and taken stock in a medical supply firm no one noticed until the world needed more gloves and masks. I had kept receipts of goodness and turned them into growth. I had given grants to clinics in small neighborhoods that don't make the news. I had promised myself that money was for solving problems, not starting wars. I kept my life simple so I could keep my heart simple. Still, I am human. I bleed when cut. I cry when mocked. Money is not armor. Character is. But sometimes money can be a mirror that shows people the shape of their choices. So I laid the letter in front of Mark. I watched his eyes move from one line to the next. I watched pride lose to math. I watched the idea of me, that quiet woman in soft sweaters, change inside his head. And then the door opened. The footsteps were slow, sure. A cane touched the floor with a firm click. In walked a man in a navy suit I knew well, Mr. Dalton, my family's lawyer since I was 23. He nodded to me, then to the nurse, and set a neat folder on the tray table. Behind him stood a woman in a simple grey dress with a press badge at her collar and a small camera bag at her feet. Mark's eyes jumped from the letter to the folder to the badge, like he was watching a magic trick disappear. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," Mr. Dalton said, calm as rain. "I'm sorry to visit you here, but time matters." Mark found his voice. "What is this? Why is he here? Why is she here?" Mr. Dalton folded his hands. "We received notice at my office early this morning. It appears someone attempted to transfer funds from your joint account to a new private account not in your name." He looked at Mark with no expression. "The bank flagged it. They called me. I advised them to freeze the account until we could verify." Mark's mouth opened. "That's a mistake," he said too fast. "A mix-up. I was just—" "Of course," Mr. Dalton said, as if acknowledging a change in the weather. He turned to me. "Evelyn, I also brought the updated trust documents you asked for. If you still want to proceed, we can do so now." Mark stepped back. "Proceed with what?" I looked at my hands, at the small bruise where a needle had been. I thought of my mother and her kind eyes. I thought of my father turning bolts with care, never stripping a single thread. I thought of how easily people hurt each other when they are afraid, and how much strength it takes to heal instead of harm. I lifted my chin. "Proceed," I said. Mr. Dalton opened the folder. The woman with the press badge clicked her pen and raised her eyes. She was not a reporter in the loud sense. She had been the community outreach lead for one of my clinics, and she recorded testimonials with a tiny camera to help raise funds for mobile caravans. I had asked her to join us for one reason: truth likes a witness. Mark's face flushed. "What are you doing?" he asked, breathless. "Evelyn, don't be dramatic." I found my voice, stronger now, like a river finding the ocean. "I am not being dramatic, Mark," I said. "I am being clear." He shook his head, laughing a small, broken laugh. "You think money makes you powerful? You think you can humiliate me because you have a big account?" "No," I said softly. "I think choices make us powerful. I think kindness keeps us human." He stared at the press badge again, then at the letter, then at me. He took a step closer, hands open, voice sweet again. "We can fix this," he said. "I was just scared. The accident, everything, Emily is just a friend. You know how I get when I panic. I heard the old spell trying to rise, his charm, his excuses, his rope made of soft words. But I had learned something in the quiet. Empathy is not the same as permission. You can hold someone's pain without holding their poison." I drew a breath that did not shake. "I forgive you for the fear," I said. "I do not forgive you for the betrayal." His jaw tightened. "You don't want to do this," he warned. "You're tired. You'll regret it." I met his eyes. "I am tired," I said. "Tired of carrying the weight of someone else's lies." Mr. Dalton slid a pen toward me. As I reached for it, the heart monitor tapped out a fast rhythm, as if the machine itself knew the next seconds would draw a new line in the story. I steadied my hand and lowered the pen to the page, and then the door flew open again. A nurse stood there, breathless. "Mrs. Carter," she said, eyes wide, "you have a visitor who insists this cannot wait." Behind her, in a bright red dress and a smile made of glass, stood Emily. She stepped into the room like it already belonged to her and lifted her phone, its screen glowing. "Evelyn," she sang, "since we're all being honest today." She tapped the screen and a video started to play. Mark and Emily at a rooftop bar last night, whispering plans over champagne. The phone's speaker hissed as their voices, his voice, spoke words I had never heard spoken so clearly. The nurse turned pale. Mr. Dalton went very still. Mark moved toward Emily, whispering, "What are you doing?" She smirked, eyes on me. "Winning." The monitor beside my bed leaped into a frantic rhythm. I did not faint. I did not fight. I sat quietly, feeling the strange mix of hurt and calm, of ending and beginning, gathering like a storm at the edge of town. I held the pen. I looked at the trust papers. I looked at Emily's shining smile and Mark's shaking hands. The room was small but full of truth, and then something happened that none of us expected. Something loud enough to break the air itself. From the hallway came a voice I had not heard since high school, a voice that once read books to me when the lights went out because we couldn't pay the bill. The voice of the one person who knew both my soft heart and my steel spine. "Evelyn?" the voice called. "Baby, I'm here." My mother. She stepped into the doorway with her old nurse's badge still clipped to her coat, her eyes steady, her mouth set in a line that meant business. She took in the room in one glance, the papers, the phone, the faces. Then she looked at me. Not at my money, not at my pain, just me. "Is anyone bleeding?" she asked the nurse, crisp and calm. "No, ma'am," the nurse said. "Good," my mother replied. "Then the only emergency in this room is a moral one." She moved aside, and behind her rolled a tall metal cart pushed by a hospital administrator in a navy blazer. On top of the cart sat a sealed box with the bank's logo and a stack of official envelopes. The administrator cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "per your instructions filed this morning, we're here to complete an emergency security change and deliver all account keys and logs to you directly. We also have a court-stamped temporary protective order regarding attempted financial fraud, effective immediately." Emily's smile cracked. Mark took a step back. The room tilted toward a new center. I lifted the pen again, the line between past and future thin as the stroke I was about to make. And just as the tip touched the paper, the fire alarm in the hallway shrieked to life. A red light began to flash. The nurse gasped. The administrator clutched the box. Mr. Dalton covered the folder with his hand to protect the papers. A recorded voice said, "Attention, please remain calm. Proceed to the nearest exit." Smoke did not pour in. Flames did not appear. But the sound was fierce enough to stop everything and force a choice. I looked up at my mother. She gave a tiny nod, the kind that says, "I trust you. Do what you know is right." I closed my fingers tighter around the pen. The alarm kept screaming, and I signed the first line. "Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments, and if this hooked you like the video, share it with a friend who needs a little courage today, and subscribe so you don't miss our future videos." The fire alarm screamed through the hospital halls, red lights flashing like warning eyes. Nurses rushed by, their shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Patients groaned, some frightened, others confused. But inside my room, the chaos had a sharper edge. Mark stood frozen, sweat beading on his forehead. Emily lowered her phone, her smirk slipping as the alarm shrieked louder. Mr. Dalton calmly closed the folder and tucked it under his arm. My mother placed one hand on the bed rail, steadying me, as if to remind me I was not alone. The administrator holding the sealed bank box looked nervous. His hands trembled slightly as he glanced toward the door. "We need to evacuate," he muttered. "No," I said firmly, though my voice was soft. "Not until this is finished." The nurse hesitated. "Ma'am, protocol requires—" I turned to her with calm eyes. "If this building were burning, smoke would already be filling this room. Look around. This alarm is not about fire, it is about fear. Someone wants this moment interrupted." Mark swallowed hard. "That's ridiculous," he snapped, but his voice cracked like thin glass. Emily raised her phone higher. "Maybe the building really is burning," she said with mock sweetness. "You don't want to die hugging a piece of paper, do you?" I looked at her, not with anger, but with pity. "No, Emily," I said softly. "I don't want to die hugging a lie." For a heartbeat, silence pressed against the alarm's wail. And then, with one smooth motion, I signed the document. My hand shook, but the ink flowed steady and dark. The trust papers were no longer waiting, they were living. The protective order was now in force, the accounts secured. Mark gasped. "Evelyn." "Don't," I said. "Not another word." The nurse darted to the hallway, returning moments later. "It was a false alarm," she confirmed breathlessly. "Someone pulled it manually, but security can't find the person." My mother gave a small nod. Of course they can't. Emily's smile had vanished completely. Her face was pale now, her confidence cracking. Mark turned to her with wide eyes. "Was it you?" he hissed. She shrugged, but the twitch in her lip betrayed her. Mr. Dalton, steady as stone, slipped the signed document back into his folder. "It's done," he said. And just like that, the room was divided. There was me, frail on a hospital bed but holding truth like a sword. There was my mother, her hands gentle, but her eyes sharp as needles. There was Mr. Dalton, the quiet witness of law. The administrator clutching the sealed bank box like a sacred relic. And on the other side, Mark and Emily, their partnership already showing cracks, their lies exposed like roots in dry soil. But the story was not finished. Signing papers was not the end. It was the beginning of a storm that would test every bond, every mask, every hidden truth. The days that followed were heavy with whispers. Nurses who once only checked my pulse now lingered by the door, curious about the visitors who came. Lawyers, bankers, old friends I hadn't seen in years, they trickled into the hospital one by one. Each carried a piece of the puzzle I had built over decades, each confirming that the wealth I had guarded in silence was very real. Mark tried to smile through it all. He brought flowers every morning, sat by my bed, and held my hand as if nothing had happened. He whispered apologies when no one else was in the room. He begged me to believe that Emily was just a phase, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted too often toward the documents, the briefcases, the people in suits. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at what he had lost. Emily visited twice more, her red dresses turning heads in the hospital corridors. She pretended to care, but her words dripped poison. "You're strong, Evelyn," she said with a fake smile. "But even strong people get tired. You should rest. Let others take care of your money. You don't want to stress yourself." I looked her straight in the eye. "I have been taking care of myself longer than you have been wearing those dresses." Her smile cracked, and she left in silence. One evening, as the sky outside turned purple and gold, my mother pulled a chair close. She took my hand and stroked it gently. "You've carried this secret fortune all these years," she said softly. "Why now? Why reveal it?" I closed my eyes. "Because kindness without wisdom becomes weakness. I thought silence was strength, but silence gave Mark space to betray me. It's time I spoke, not for revenge, but for truth. If I die tomorrow, I want the truth alive." She squeezed my hand. "And if you live?" I opened my eyes, staring at the glowing sunset. "Then I will use it to heal what others try to break." The calm did not last. On the 7th day, while I was still recovering, Mr. Dalton returned with new papers. He explained the next steps for transferring certain assets fully under my sole name. As he laid them out on the table, Mark burst into the room without knocking. His tie was loose, his eyes red. "This is insane," he shouted, startling the nurse. "Evelyn, you can't do this. You can't throw away our marriage like trash." I sat upright, my voice calm. "Marriage is not trash, Mark. Lies are." "You think you're so perfect," he sneered. "You hid $750 million from me. What kind of wife does that?" I felt my mother's hand on my shoulder. "The kind of wife who trusted too much," I said. "The kind of woman who gave love freely only to be mocked when she was most vulnerable." Mark's face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this. You can't handle this kind of power. You'll crumble under it." I tilted my head, studying him. "No, Mark, I won't crumble, but you already have." Before he could reply, security guards appeared at the door. The administrator had alerted them. "Sir," one guard said, "we need you to leave." Mark's eyes darted around the room, wild and desperate. He looked at Emily, who had followed him in silently, but Emily was no longer smiling. She stood at the door, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. She had already begun to see that Mark's sinking ship would not carry her to shore. As the guards led him away, he shouted over his shoulder, "You'll regret this, Evelyn. You'll regret all of it." The door slammed shut, leaving the room vibrating with the echo of his rage. I leaned back against my pillow, my body trembling from the confrontation. My mother brushed my hair back gently. "Rest," she whispered. "The storm has only begun, but storms also pass." I closed my eyes, but the words, "You'll regret this," kept circling in my mind like a vulture. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of machines, when I heard a soft tap at the window. It startled me. Slowly, I turned my head. There, through the glass, in the dim hospital light, stood Emily. She was outside on the narrow ledge, her red dress a ghostly shadow against the dark. She held her phone up to the glass, its screen glowing with a single message typed in bold letters. "Meet me alone, or you lose everything." My breath caught, my pulse raced. The machine beside me beeped faster. I blinked, and she pressed her palm flat against the glass, her smile returning, cold, sharp, unshaken. Then, like a shadow vanishing, she slipped into the darkness. The nurse rushed in at the sound of my quickening heart monitor. "Are you okay, Mrs. Carter?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to steady. "Yes," I whispered, "but something tells me tomorrow won't be quiet." And I was right. Because by morning a new secret would explode, one that would shake not only Mark and Emily, but me too. The hospital room felt colder that morning. Even though the sun poured through the window and painted the walls in soft gold, there was a heaviness in the air like the calm before a storm. My body was weak, but my mind was sharp. I could still see Emily's shadow from the night before, her red dress pressed against the glass, her phone glowing with that message. "Meet me alone or you lose everything." It wasn't just a threat, it was a challenge. And I knew deep inside, Emily wasn't playing small games anymore. Mr. Dalton arrived early with another folder under his arm. He set it down gently on the table by my bed. "Evelyn," he said, his voice calm as always, "we've secured the assets. Your accounts are frozen against any unauthorized attempts. But there's something else you should know." He opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. It was a grainy still from a security camera. Emily, standing in the hospital's underground parking garage, was handing a thick envelope to a man in a janitor's uniform. The timestamp was from just before the fire alarm had gone off yesterday. "She bribed someone," my mother said sharply, her eyes narrowing. Dalton nodded. "We can't prove what was inside the envelope, but we can guess. She likely paid someone to pull the alarm and create a distraction." I stared at the photo, my stomach tightening. Emily wasn't just reckless, she was dangerous, and she wasn't going to stop. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Mark stormed in again, this time without a tie, his hair messy, his face pale. His voice shook as he shouted, "Evelyn, we need to talk." My mother rose from her chair like a shield. "No," she said firmly. "You need to leave." Mark ignored her, his eyes fixed on me. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "Evelyn, listen to me. You don't understand. Emily, she's not who you think she is. She's dangerous. She's been using me." I let his words hang in the air. The irony was almost bitterly funny. "Using you?" I said softly. "And what were you doing with me, Mark? Loving me or using me?" His jaw clenched. He dropped his eyes to the floor. "Please," he said again, almost whispering, "I made a mistake. I was weak. But I never wanted this. She's threatening me too now." Before anyone could respond, a loud knock came at the door. The nurse stepped in, followed by two uniformed police officers. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Mrs. Carter." Before anyone could respond, a loud knock came at the door. The nurse stepped in, followed by two uniformed police officers. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "We need to inform you that last night there was an attempted break-in at your private residence. The intruder tripped the alarm system and fled before we arrived. Neighbors reported seeing a woman in a red dress leaving the scene." The room froze. My mother gasped. Dalton's face hardened, and Mark's eyes widened in panic. "Emily." The officer continued, "We recommend you take additional precautions, Mrs. Carter. Until we catch the suspect, we strongly advise against being left alone." Mark suddenly stepped forward. "I can protect her," he said quickly. I'll stay with her. My mother scoffed. Protect her? You can't even protect yourself from your own mistress. Mark's face turned red. I made mistakes, but I still love her. I raised my hand, silencing both of them. Officers, I said, my voice calm but steady. Thank you. Please update me as soon as you have more information. They nodded and left the room, their footsteps heavy in the hallway. Mark turned back to me, desperation etched across his face. Evelyn, please, you have to believe me. Emily is not just after me anymore. She wants you. She wants everything you own. She's not going to stop until she gets it. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said quietly, and you helped her open the door. His shoulders slumped. He looked smaller now, broken, a man who had gambled and lost everything. But before the silence could settle, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The nurse picked it up and handed it to me. The screen flashed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello, Evelyn, came Emily's voice, smooth and venomous. Did you like my little visit last night? My grip on the phone tightened. What do you want, Emily? She laughed softly. What I've always wanted. What he promised me. Money, security, power. But since you insist on making this difficult, let's raise the stakes. You have 24 hours to meet me, alone. If you don't, the world will see something you don't want them to see. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? You'll find out, she said. Check your email. The line went dead. Dalton quickly opened his tablet and pulled up my inbox. There it was, an email from an anonymous sender. He clicked it open, and a video filled the screen. It was me, lying in the hospital bed, weak, fragile. The video had been secretly recorded from the corner of the room. My private conversations with Mark, my whispered pain, even the moment I revealed my $750 million trust, it was all captured. Emily had footage, and she was ready to release it. My heart pounded. My privacy, my dignity, everything I had tried to protect could be shattered in seconds. Dalton leaned closer, his voice low. She planted a camera. She's been recording you. Mark swore under his breath. That woman is insane. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. No, I said, she's not insane. She's greedy. And greed is predictable. My mother squeezed my hand. What will you do? I stared at the screen, at the proof of Emily's trap. My voice came out calm, almost steady. I'll do what I've always done. I'll listen. I'll watch. And then I'll turn her greed against her. The room was quiet for a moment, the weight of the battle settling on all of us. Then suddenly the lights flickered. The machines beeped. The power in the entire hospital went out, leaving only the faint glow of emergency lights. Nurses shouted in the hallway. Footsteps rushed past the door, and then from the corner of the dark room came the faint sound of glass shattering. Everyone froze, and I knew, with a sinking certainty, Emily wasn't done waiting outside windows. She was already inside. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments. Don't forget to hit like, share this story with someone who loves suspense, and subscribe so you don't miss Chapter 4. It's about to get even darker. The emergency lights painted the hospital corridors in a pale red glow, pulsing every few seconds like a warning heartbeat. Machines beeped unevenly. Nurses hurried with flashlights. My room, once filled with sunlight, now looked like a stage for shadows. I gripped the side of the bed, my pulse racing. My mother stood close to me, her hand pressed gently against my arm. Mr. Dalton leaned forward, his jaw tight, ready for anything. Mark, sweaty, trembling, stood by the door, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. Then came the sound again, glass, shattering, this time closer. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. The nurse gasped and turned toward the sound. "I'll call security," she began. But before she could move, the door to my room creaked open, slowly, too slowly. And there she was, Emily. Her red dress shimmered in the glow of the emergency light. Her hair was pulled back tight, her lips painted in that same poisonous shade of scarlet. She stepped into the room with a grace that felt more like a predator stalking its prey. In her hand, she held a small camera, the lens flashing faintly. "Well," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "looks like the party couldn't start without me." Mark's face drained of color. "Emily, what are you doing?" She tilted her head, her smile widening. "What I always do, darling. Winning." She turned her gaze to me, and her eyes glittered like cold steel. "Evelyn," she said, "you've made this so unnecessarily difficult, but that's fine. Difficult just makes the victory sweeter." My voice was calm, though my chest felt like it might explode. "What do you want, Emily?" She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the tile floor. "I told you already. Money, security, power. And since you're too stubborn to hand it over, I'll just take it another way." She lifted the camera. "You see, I've been recording everything. Your husband's betrayal, your little bank secrets, even that touching moment when you showed him the fortune he'll never touch. Imagine what will happen when this video goes online. Headlines, gossip, whispers. Everyone will see you not as the quiet, kind Evelyn, but as a woman who was mocked, humiliated, and betrayed." Her smile sharpened. "Your fortune won't save your dignity." Dalton stepped forward. "You're blackmailing her," he said evenly. "That's a crime." Emily laughed. "Oh, please. Crimes are only crimes when you get caught. And trust me, I don't get caught." At that moment, the emergency lights flickered again. The room dimmed, then brightened. And in that flicker, something inside me shifted. For years I had been quiet, humble, unseen. But now, staring at Emily's cruel smile, I felt a fire inside me. I wasn't just Evelyn, the wife, the patient, the woman mocked on her hospital bed. I was Evelyn Carter, the woman who had built a $750 million empire from silence and wisdom. I straightened in bed. My voice came out clear, sharp, like a bell in the dark. "You think you've trapped me, Emily, but what you don't realize is that your greed is your weakness." Her smile faltered for just a second. "What are you talking about?" "You record everything because you crave proof. Proof of your games, proof of your victories. But greed blinds you. You've forgotten that every recording can also be evidence." Dalton's eyes lit up. "She's right," he said. "The footage you've taken without consent, on hospital property involving financial threats, it's already enough to bury you." Emily's jaw tightened. "Unless I release it first." I shook my head. "Even if you do, Emily, the world will see the truth. They'll see a greedy woman so desperate for wealth that she mocked a sick woman in her hospital bed. They'll see you for what you are." She took a step closer, her face twisting with anger. "No, they'll see you as a fraud." And then, without warning, she lunged toward my bed, shoving Dalton aside. The camera in her hand was aimed at my face, the lens blinking. "Say it," she hissed. "Say you're nothing without that money." But before she could get any closer, my mother moved. She grabbed the metal IV stand beside my bed and swung it with surprising strength. The stand crashed against Emily's arm, sending the camera tumbling to the floor. The lens cracked, sparks hissing. Emily screamed, "You witch!" The door burst open and 2 security guards rushed in. One grabbed Emily by the shoulders, the other by the wrists. She thrashed wildly, her red dress whipping like fire. "Let go of me, do you know who I am?" she screamed. "Yes," my mother said calmly, her voice steady. "We know exactly who you are." The guards dragged her out, her shrieks echoing down the hallway. The broken camera lay on the floor, a dead eye staring up at us. For a long moment the room was silent except for the beeping of the machines. Then Mark spoke, his voice trembling. "Evelyn, I swear I didn't know she would go this far." I turned my head slowly and looked at him. "No, Mark, but you knew she would go far enough." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face crumpled, his pride collapsing in on itself. He sank into the chair by the window, burying his head in his hands. Dalton bent down, picking up the shattered camera. "This," he said quietly, "is evidence. She'll face charges for this. But Evelyn, this isn't over. Someone like her doesn't just stop. She'll try again." I closed my eyes for a moment, drawing in a slow, steady breath. "Then we'll be ready." My mother smoothed the blanket over me, her touch warm, protective. "Kindness isn't weakness, Evelyn," she whispered. "But sometimes to protect kindness you need to fight." I opened my eyes, staring at the broken camera, at Mark's crumpled figure, at Dalton's determined face. The battle wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, about truth, about who I really was when everything else was stripped away. And deep down, I knew the storm was only getting stronger, because Emily wasn't finished, and neither was I. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves suspense, and subscribe so you don't miss the moment where Emily's revenge takes a darker, more dangerous turn. The night after Emily was dragged out of the hospital, silence finally returned to my room. But it was the heavy kind of silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes you wonder what comes next. I lay awake, staring at the faint glow of the emergency light, listening to the hum of the machines. My body was weak, but my mind refused to rest. Mark hadn't left. He sat slumped in the corner chair, his face pale and hollow, as if all the charm and bravado he once carried had drained out of him. My mother dozed lightly by my bedside, her hand still resting on my blanket. Mr. Dalton had gone home, but left his phone on, promising to return at first light. But I knew Emily wasn't finished. People like her, driven by greed and hunger, don't stop because of a locked door or broken camera. No, they retreat, they plot, and they strike harder. And I was right. At sunrise, the hospital buzzed with whispers. Nurses leaned close to each other, doctors huddled in corners, their voices low but urgent. When I asked what was happening, a young nurse finally explained. "Mrs. Carter," she said, her eyes darting nervously, "your name is all over the news." I frowned. "The news?" She handed me her phone. On the screen was a headline in bold letters. "Billionaire hidden fortune revealed. Husband betrayed at hospital bed." My heart skipped. Beneath the headline was a photo of me, frail and pale in the hospital bed, with Mark standing beside me looking smug. The picture was grainy, but clear enough to recognize. Dalton hadn't even arrived yet, and already the story was everywhere. "Who leaked this?" my mother asked sharply, her voice trembling with anger. I didn't need to answer. I knew. Emily. Mark staggered to his feet. No, this wasn't supposed to happen. She swore she wouldn't release it yet." He froze, realizing what he had just said. My eyes narrowed. "You knew she had the footage?" His face drained of color. "Evelyn, please. I didn't think she'd actually—" I cut him off. "You didn't think. That's always been your problem, Mark. You never think beyond your own reflection." He collapsed back into the chair, burying his face in his hands. My mother touched my arm gently. "Don't waste your strength on him, baby. The battle isn't with Mark anymore, it's with her." By the time Dalton returned, the hospital was surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed at every entrance, journalists shouted questions, and vans lined the street. The once quiet hospital now looked like the front of a courthouse on trial day. Dalton's face was grim as he entered the room. He set down his briefcase and pulled out his tablet. "She released selective footage," he explained. "Short clips designed to embarrass you, Evelyn. She cut out context, made it look like Mark was mocking you, and you were powerless. The media is running with it because it sells." I stayed quiet, my heart pounding. "But here's the thing," Dalton continued. "She's sloppy. In her rush to hurt you, she uploaded raw clips that still contain metadata, timestamps, device IDs. We can trace them back to her camera, and that, Evelyn, is evidence." For the first time that morning, I felt a spark of hope. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "So, what happens now?" Dalton's gaze hardened. "Now? Now we fight fire with fire." That evening, Dalton arranged a private meeting in the hospital's boardroom. The hospital director, 2 police officers, and a digital forensics expert were present. They set up a large monitor projecting the video clips Emily had leaked. Each clip was short, shaky, and cruel. The first showed me pale in the bed, Mark smirking. The second showed me pulling the envelope from my bag. The third showed my fortune revealed. The headlines on the screen beneath each clip were brutal. "Wife betrayed by Mistress." Billionaire fortune hidden. Scorned woman humiliated. I felt exposed, violated. But Dalton leaned forward and pointed at the metadata. Every file links back to the same device, Emily's camera. And guess what? The device ID matches the one found in the shattered camera from last night. The police officer nodded. That's enough to issue a warrant. My mother's lips curved into a rare, fierce smile. Let her run. Let her hide. The truth will find her. I almost smiled too, but then my phone buzzed. Another message. This time, no unknown number. It came directly from Emily's account. You think you've won? Sweet Evelyn, you've only started playing my game. Tomorrow at noon your fortune disappears unless you meet me. Alone. Attached was a screenshot, my bank account dashboard, with one word written across it in red letters, transfer pending. Dalton's face went pale. That's impossible. We locked everything down. But I knew Emily. She wasn't bluffing. She had found another way in. Mark's head snapped up, panic etched across his face. Evelyn, please don't meet her. She's dangerous. You don't know what she's capable of. I looked at him, my voice steady. No, Mark. I know exactly what she's capable of. The question is, does she know what I'm capable of? That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, my mind replaying everything. The betrayal, the mockery, the threats, the headlines. I thought about my parents' lessons, about kindness, about wisdom, about saving what you can't spend. And then I remembered something. Years ago, when I first built my trust, I created a fail-safe, a hidden clause buried deep in the paperwork, known only to me and Dalton. If anyone ever tried to force my hand through blackmail or threats, the accounts would trigger a transfer, away from me, away from anyone greedy, and into a foundation that funded hospitals, schools, and shelters. Emily thought she could take everything from me. What she didn't know was that the harder she pushed, the closer she came to destroying herself. I smiled in the darkness, my heart beating steady. Because tomorrow, at noon, the real game would begin. The morning came with a heavy sky. The sun tried to break through the clouds, but the light felt dim, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. My hospital room was quieter than usual, though outside I could hear the faint noise of reporters who hadn't left since the story broke. I sat propped up in bed, dressed not in a hospital gown this time, but in a soft blue blouse and grey cardigan my mother had brought from home. My hair was brushed neatly back. I wanted to look less like a patient and more like the woman I truly was, a woman who had built an empire quietly, who had been mocked, but not broken. At exactly 9 a.m., Dalton arrived. He carried 2 briefcases this time, his face tight with determination. My mother followed him into the room, her expression calm but her eyes sharp, like a hawk watching the horizon. Mark trailed behind them, looking disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Dalton placed one briefcase on the table. Evelyn, he said, we've traced the attempted transfer Emily threatened. It didn't go through. She doesn't have access to your accounts. Relief washed over me, but only for a moment. However, Dalton continued, she does have access to some of your personal files. She's threatening to release more private recordings if you don't meet her. She sent this. He opened the second briefcase and pulled out a tablet. On the screen was another video. This one cut deeper than the rest. It wasn't just me in the hospital bed. It was a clip of me crying quietly in the middle of the night when I thought no one was watching. My voice, weak and broken, whispering to myself, why wasn't I enough? My stomach twisted. My privacy, my vulnerability laid bare for the world. My mother gasped softly. Oh, baby. Dalton's voice was firm. This is psychological warfare. She wants to humiliate you until you give in. I swallowed hard, forcing the tears back. My voice came out steady. Then I'll meet her, not because she demands it, but because it's time to end this. Mark leapt forward. No, Evelyn, you don't understand. Emily doesn't just want money. She wants destruction. She'll ruin you. She'll ruin me, too. Please don't go. I turned to him slowly. "Mark, you already ruined yourself. All Emily did was light the fire." He winced, his head dropping, but I didn't let myself soften. Not this time. Dalton adjusted his glasses. "She gave us the location. A private lounge at the Crestwood Hotel, noon sharp. She said you must come alone." My mother's hand gripped mine. "You're not going alone." I squeezed her hand back. "I'll walk in alone." "But I won't be alone." Dalton nodded. "Exactly. Security will be in place. Discreet but ready. We'll wire the room. And Evelyn, remember the failsafe." I allowed myself a small smile. "Yes. Emily thinks she's playing with my money. What she doesn't know is that the game is already rigged." The hours passed slowly, each minute dragging heavier than the last. At 11:30, I was discharged temporarily from the hospital under police escort. A sleek black car waited outside, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Carter, are you meeting your husband's mistress? Is it true your fortune is at risk? Do you regret hiding your wealth?" I ignored them all, stepping into the car with Dalton at my side and my mother's hand squeezing mine before the door closed. The ride to the Crestwood Hotel was silent, except for the low hum of the engine. My heart pounded, but my face remained calm. I thought of my parents' lessons again, my mother's words about kindness, my father's advice about fixing what you can reach. I couldn't control Emily's greed, but I could control my response to it. When we arrived, the hotel's glass doors glimmered in the grey light. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and expensive cologne. The lounge was empty except for a single figure seated near the back. Emily. She wore another red dress, tighter than before, her hair curled perfectly, her lipstick painted like a weapon. A glass of champagne rested in her hand. She looked up as I entered, her smile sharp. "Well, well," she purred, "the Queen herself has arrived." I walked slowly toward her, each step steady, deliberate. When I reached the table, I sat across from her. "You wanted me here," I said quietly. "So here I am." Emily leaned forward, her eyes glinting. "I'll get straight to the point. You transfer $50 million to my account today and I'll delete everything. The videos, the recordings, the files, all of it. No more humiliation." Her smile widened. "Or you refuse. And tomorrow morning, every media outlet in the country will play your weakest moment on repeat. Your tears, your shame, your humiliation. Tell me, Evelyn, how long do you think your empire of dignity will last then?" I studied her face, her hunger, her arrogance, and then, slowly, I smiled. "Emily," I said softly, "you think you've won because you have recordings. But what you don't realize is that every move you've made has already been recorded too." Her eyes flickered just for a second. "What do you mean?" Dalton's voice came from the small earpiece in my ear. "Now." I tapped the table gently. Hidden cameras in the lounge, set up by Dalton's team, blinked to life. Two officers stepped forward from the shadows at the edge of the room. Emily's face paled. "What is this?" I leaned in closer, my voice calm, almost kind. "This is the end of your game. You bribed staff, broke into my home, planted hidden cameras, leaked private recordings, attempted fraud, and now you're caught." Her champagne glass trembled in her hand. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, but I already did," I said. "Every word you've spoken today has been recorded. Every threat, every demand. The choice isn't mine anymore, it's the law's." The officers stepped forward. "Emily Parker, you're under arrest for blackmail, fraud, and unlawful surveillance." She shot to her feet, her face twisted in rage. "You think this is over? You think money makes you powerful?" I rose too, my body still weak but my voice strong. "No, Emily. Character makes us powerful. Money just shows people who they really are." The officers took her by the arms, pulling her back as she thrashed and screamed. "You'll regret this, Evelyn, you'll regret it." I stood tall, my heart steady, watching as she was dragged away. Dalton entered the lounge, his face calm but satisfied. "Well done, Evelyn. Very well done." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe freely. The storm was not fully over, but the sky had begun to clear. But as I stepped back toward the car, my relief lasted only a moment, because Mark was waiting outside. His eyes were hollow, his face twisted, and in his hand he held a folded piece of paper. He looked at me, his voice low, trembling with something between rage and desperation. "If she's going down," he whispered, "then I'm not going down alone." And he handed me the paper. When I unfolded it, my heart stopped. It wasn't Emily's handwriting. It was Mark's, and it was a document I never expected to see. The paper in my trembling hands felt heavier than stone. My eyes scanned the words, each line pulling me deeper into a darkness I didn't know existed. My pulse quickened, my breath shallow. It was worse than I had imagined. It was a contract, signed and dated, a legal document between Mark and Emily. The agreement promised Emily half of my estate if anything were to happen to me, if I died suddenly, if my assets were transferred, if my trust dissolved. Mark had signed it willingly, his signature bold at the bottom, and beneath it, in smaller writing, were clauses about accounts, property, even charitable donations, all redirected into Emily's name. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated theft. My hand shook as I lowered the paper. My voice was low but sharp. "Mark, what is this?" He looked broken, his shoulders hunched, his eyes bloodshot. But behind that sorrow I saw something else. Fear. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered. "Emily pushed me. She said it was just paperwork, just a safety net. She said it didn't mean anything." I stared at him, my stomach twisting. "Didn't mean anything? You signed away my life, Mark. You signed away me." His voice cracked. I was desperate. I thought you didn't care about me anymore. You always worked, you always hid things. Emily made me feel wanted." I laughed bitterly, though it wasn't from joy. "Wanted? She wanted your signature, not your soul. And you gave it to her gladly." His eyes filled with tears. "Evelyn, please. I know I failed you. I know I destroyed everything. But I swear to you, I never wanted you dead. I never wanted—" "Enough," I said, my voice cutting through his pleas. "You didn't need to want me dead, Mark. Signing this was enough. You betrayed me long before Emily ever walked through that door." Dalton stepped closer, his eyes cold as ice. "This document is criminal. If Emily had attempted to act on it, Mark, you'd be complicit. You realize that, don't you?" Mark flinched. His hands shook. I thought she loved me. I thought she'd protect me." My mother's voice, usually so gentle, was sharp as a whip. "Protect you? She would have buried you the moment she got what she wanted. Foolish boy." Mark sank into a chair, covering his face. His sobs filled the lobby of the hotel, but I felt nothing. No pity, no sorrow. Just a deep, steady ache. The ache of knowing the man I once loved had turned into a stranger. By afternoon, the police had taken Emily into custody. Her face was splashed across every news channel, her red dress immortalized as the uniform of her downfall. Reporters speculated about her relationship with Mark, about my hidden fortune, about the betrayal that had unfolded in the shadows of a hospital room. But the storm wasn't done, because now Mark was on the edge, desperate and dangerous. That night, I returned to the hospital under heavy guard. Dalton insisted I stay there until the trial began, for my own safety. The corridors buzzed with whispers. Staff who once avoided my gaze now looked at me with wide eyes, as if I were both victim and legend. Mark had been escorted out earlier, but not before he begged to speak with me one last time. I refused. I thought silence would be my final answer, but silence doesn't always protect you. At midnight, the hallway outside my room grew quiet. Too quiet. I woke to the sound of the door handle turning slowly. My heart raced as the door creaked open. There he was, Mark. His face pale, his eyes hollow, his movements unsteady. He wasn't alone. In his hand, he carried a small, heavy object wrapped in cloth. My mother, who had been dozing in the chair, jumped to her feet. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. He looked at me, his voice trembling. I had to see her. I had to explain. Dalton, who had been working late in the adjoining room, entered quickly. His eyes darted to the cloth-wrapped object. "Mark," he said firmly, "put it down." Mark shook his head, tears streaking down his face. "You don't understand. Emily threatened me. She said if I didn't sign, she'd destroy me. I thought I was protecting myself. I thought I still mattered to someone." "By selling me out?" I asked, my voice steady. He dropped to his knees, the object clattering to the floor. The cloth fell away, revealing what it was. A gun. My mother gasped. Dalton froze. Mark's voice cracked into a sob. "I wasn't going to use it. I just wanted you to see how scared I am, how lost I am without you." My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I saw not the man who betrayed me, but the man I once loved. The man who had made me laugh at a wedding, who had left sticky notes with hearts on the fridge. But that man was gone, buried beneath lies and weakness. I steadied myself. "Mark, fear doesn't excuse betrayal, and weakness doesn't excuse cruelty. You mocked me when I was at my weakest. You sided with her. And now you bring a gun into my hospital room? That's not love, that's desperation." He wept openly, his shoulders shaking. The guards arrived moments later, drawn by the noise, and restrained him gently but firmly. As they led him away, his voice echoed down the hallway. "I'm sorry, Evelyn, I'm so sorry." But his words no longer touched me, because I knew now, love without loyalty is just noise. The next morning, Dalton returned with news. "Emily has agreed to a plea deal," he said. "But in exchange, she's naming Mark as her partner in the scheme. He's facing charges, too." I closed my eyes, my heart heavy. The man who had mocked me, betrayed me, and tried to profit from my pain would now face justice alongside his mistress. My mother touched my hand gently. "This is the price of greed," she said. "But you, Evelyn, you've shown strength. You've turned betrayal into truth." I nodded slowly. The storm had nearly destroyed me, but it had also revealed something I had forgotten about myself. I was stronger than I knew, and yet I felt the story wasn't finished. Because in the shadows of Emily's arrest and Mark's downfall, whispers began to surface. Whispers of another hand in the game, someone else pulling strings, someone who wanted more than just money. And I knew, deep inside, the final storm was still ahead. The hospital was supposed to feel safe again after Emily's arrest and Mark's removal. But safety, I had learned, is sometimes just an illusion, the kind that lulls you to sleep while shadows gather at the edge of the room. The news channels ran non-stop coverage of Emily's downfall. They called her the Mistress of Greed and splashed her photo across every screen in her infamous red dress. Reporters dissected her motives, replayed her courtroom walk, and speculated about the trial. But buried between those headlines were whispers, small, almost unnoticed. Who funded her legal team so quickly? Where did she get the insider access to bank systems? How did she learn about Evelyn Carter's private trust in the first place? The questions gnawed at me, louder than the reporters shouting my name outside the hospital. Emily was clever, yes, ruthless, yes, but she wasn't brilliant enough to hack financial systems or leak private files with such precision. Someone bigger, smarter had been moving behind her. And soon that someone would step into the light. It started with a letter, delivered not by email, not by courier, but slipped quietly under my hospital door one early morning. The envelope was black, the handwriting neat, almost elegant. My name written in silver ink, Evelyn. I picked it up with trembling hands and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You've survived, Emily. You've survived Mark. But the game has just begun. We don't want 50 million, Evelyn. We want it all. Meet me where it all started, your old family home, midnight. Come alone. No signature, just an initial. R." My heart dropped. That house had been empty for years, left to gather dust after my parents passed. Who knew about it? Very few. which meant R wasn't just any stranger. They were someone who had studied me closely, someone who wanted me rattled. Dalton frowned as he read it. "We can't ignore this, Evelyn. Whoever this is, they're connected to everything." My mother's face was pale but fierce. "This is no longer about money. This is about control. Whoever wrote this has been watching you." I nodded slowly. "Then it's time I stopped being the one who's watched. It's time I looked them in the eye." That night the streets were quiet as Dalton's car pulled up in front of my childhood home. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling, the windows clouded with dust, but standing there brought memories rushing back. The smell of my mother's cooking, my father's laughter, the nights I read books by candlelight when the power was cut. Dalton and the police insisted on surrounding the property, but I told them firmly, "If this person sees I didn't come alone, they'll vanish, and I need answers." So I stepped inside by myself. The air was thick with dust, the wooden floor creaking under my steps. Moonlight streamed through the broken blinds, casting long shadows across the faded furniture. And then, from the corner of the room, a voice spoke. "Well done, Evelyn. You came." I froze. A figure stepped out from the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark suit. His hair was streaked with grey, his face calm, controlled. I knew him instantly. Richard Cole, my former business partner, the man who once helped me build my first investment company, the same man I cut ties with years ago when I caught him embezzling funds. My chest tightened. "You?" He smiled faintly, as though this were a casual meeting between old friends. "Me?" Richard circled slowly around the room, his shoes crunching on broken glass. "You always were sharp, Evelyn. Quiet, but sharp. You built an empire on kindness and numbers, while I had to claw my way through greed and grit. But I taught you, didn't I? I showed you the ropes, and now you think you're better than me." I steadied my breath. "You stole from me. That's why I cut you off." His smile didn't falter. "I borrowed, and I would have paid it back eventually. But you humiliated me. You made me an outcast in the very circles I helped create." He stopped in front of me, his eyes burning. "So when I saw an opportunity to remind you that power isn't built on kindness, it's built on fear, I took it." My hands clenched. "Emily, Mark, it was you all along." He gave a small nod. "Emily was useful, ambitious, hungry. I fed her just enough information and resources to make her dangerous. Mark was easier, a fool blinded by lust and greed. Together they were pawns, but I am the player." His voice lowered. "And I'm not after 50 million, Evelyn. I'm after the whole board, your fortune, your name, your legacy." For a moment the room was silent except for the creak of the old wood. Then I spoke, my voice calm, steady. "You think you're the player, Richard, but you've forgotten something." His brow furrowed slightly. "What?" I took a step forward, my chin high. "I built my empire on kindness. And kindness builds allies. Quiet ones. Loyal ones. People you overlook because you think they don't matter. You had pawns, Richard. I have people. And they don't forget." Right on cue, the front door burst open. Dalton, flanked by 2 officers, stormed inside. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Richard's eyes widened, his smug smile faltering for the first time. "You set me up," he hissed. "No," I said softly. "You set yourself up. You invited me here. You gave yourself away." The officers moved in, restraining him as he cursed and fought. His voice echoed in the empty house. "This isn't over, Evelyn. I'll destroy you. I'll destroy everything you love." But I only stood taller, watching as they dragged him away, because I knew Richard was dangerous, ruthless. But the moment he stepped into my childhood home, he had already lost. Back at the hospital, my mother held my hand. "You see, baby, you didn't just survive. You proved that kindness and strength can live together, that greed may shout, but truth whispers louder." I smiled faintly, though my heart still carried the weight of the night. Emily was in custody. Mark was facing charges. And now Richard, the shadow behind them, had been caught. But as I lay back in my bed, the monitors beeping softly, I knew one thing: battles leave scars. And though the storm was almost over, the final chapter was still to come. Because storms don't just pass. They change the land they leave behind. The days after Richard's arrest blurred together like ink running in the rain. My name filled the headlines, my face filled the screens, and my story, our story, spread farther than I ever imagined. Billionaire betrayed. Mistress and husband's conspiracy foiled. Hidden mastermind revealed. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still see Emily's mocking smile, hear Mark's desperate sobs, feel Richard's cold voice slithering in my ear. The betrayal wasn't just a headline, it lived inside me, replaying in the quiet moments. And yet, I was still here, alive, breathing, stronger than the storm that tried to drown me. The hospital finally discharged me 2 weeks later. My body was healing, my spirit scarred but steady. When I stepped outside, the air felt new, crisp, almost like the world itself was giving me a second chance. Dalton met me at the car, his expression calm but focused. "Evelyn," he said, "the trials will be messy. Emily will try to cut deals. Mark will beg for leniency. Richard will fight tooth and nail. But make no mistake, you've already won. You've survived them all." I nodded, though my chest ached with a different weight. Winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like surviving a war that never should have started. At home, my mother brewed tea the way she always did when life turned heavy. She sat across from me, her eyes soft, her hands steady. "You've faced liars, thieves, and traitors," she said. "Now comes the hardest part." I frowned. "What part is that?" She sipped her tea before answering. "Deciding what kind of woman you will be after the storm." Her words lingered, heavier than any headline. The first letter came a few days later. From Mark. It arrived through his lawyer, handwritten in shaky lines. "Evelyn, I don't expect forgiveness. I know I destroyed what we had. I let greed blind me, let lust chain me, let fear turn me into a coward. Emily used me, Richard controlled me, but I chose to let them. That's on me. I will face the punishment I deserve. But please, know this. I never stopped loving you. Even when I failed you. Even when I mocked you. Even when I betrayed you. If love without loyalty is just noise, then I was the loudest fool alive. I am sorry." I set the letter down, my eyes burning but my heart unmoved. I set the letter down, my eyes burning but my heart unmoved. Love without loyalty was still just noise, and I had learned to live in silence stronger than his words. The second letter came from Emily. Her tone was venom wrapped in silk. "Evelyn, enjoy your little victory. You think I lost, but I never lose. Women like me don't vanish. We adapt. You humiliated me, but the world remembers my face now. The mistress of greed, they call me. Fame is power too, my dear, and you'll see me again. That I promise." I tore her letter in half, then in half again, until it was nothing but confetti of arrogance. Let her chase fame. Let her cling to notoriety. My power was not in headlines. It was in the quiet work I built, the lives I touched, the kindness I refused to surrender. The third letter came from Richard, typed, precise, cold. "You've won a battle, but wealth attracts wolves, Evelyn, and you have made yourself a beacon. Others will come, stronger than Emily, smarter than Mark, colder than me. When they do, remember this: you are never truly safe. Wealth is not protection. Wealth is a target." I folded his letter neatly and locked it away. Not out of fear, but as a reminder. He wasn't wrong. Wealth attracts wolves. But I wasn't prey anymore. One evening, as I sat by the fire in my living room, my mother placed her hand over mine. "You've carried pain, betrayal, and fear," she said softly. "But don't let it harden you. Kindness is still your strength. Don't let them take that from you." I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. "But how do I keep being kind, Mama, when the people closest to me used it against me. She smiled gently. Kindness doesn't mean letting people hurt you. It means choosing to heal the world, even after they try. Protect yourself, yes. Guard your heart, yes. But don't stop giving. Don't stop loving. That's where your real power lives. Her words settled deep into me, like roots drinking water. The next morning, I called Dalton. Set up the foundation, I told him. He paused. The failsafe. Yes, I said. If greed tries again, they'll only find empty hands. Let the money flow where it belongs. To hospitals, to schools, to shelters. Let it heal what they tried to destroy. Dalton's voice warmed. That's the Evelyn I've always known. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Months later, as Emily sat in prison, as Mark awaited trial, as Richard fought legal battles he could not win, my name returned to the headlines. But this time, the story was different. Billionaire's betrayal leads to 200 Mansa Foundation for families in need. Evelyn Carter turns pain into purpose. Kindness wins. Betrayed wife inspires millions. I watch the world whisper a different kind of story now. Not about humiliation, but about hope. Not about greed, but about giving. And as I walked through the new clinic my foundation had funded, children's laughter echoing in the halls, I knew the storm had passed. Yes, it left scars. Yes, it left ashes. But from those ashes something stronger had risen. Because I had survived betrayal. I had survived greed. I had survived lies. And I was still Evelyn. Not just a woman with $750 million. A woman with something far greater. A woman with kindness and the strength to protect it. The morning of the final trial dawned grey and heavy, as if the sky itself knew the weight of what was about to unfold. Emily, Mark, and Richard were all being tried separately, but today was Richard's turn, the so-called mastermind, the one who thought he could play puppeteer with my life. Dalton and I sat quietly in the courtroom as the judge entered, the room buzzing with reporters, lawyers, and curious onlookers. I felt my mother's hand squeeze mine, her silent strength flowing into me. Richard entered in shackles, but his posture was still proud, his eyes still sharp. He scanned the room until his gaze locked on me. For a second, he smirked, as though even in defeat, he wanted me to remember him as a shadow always lurking behind my success. The trial was long, filled with evidence of fraud, blackmail, and conspiracy. Dalton presented the recordings, the forged contracts, the metadata from Emily's camera. Piece by piece, the picture became clear. Richard had orchestrated it all, feeding Emily and Mark just enough to destroy themselves. By late afternoon, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. The gavel struck. The room erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. My mother whispered a prayer of relief. Dalton allowed himself a rare, small smile. But Richard didn't flinch. Instead, as the guards pulled him to his feet, he leaned forward and locked eyes with me. His voice was low, but I heard it clearly across the silence of the courtroom. This isn't the end, Evelyn. Wolves don't die. They hunt in packs, and you've just painted yourself in blood. They dragged him away before he could say more. That night, back at home, I sat by the fire again, the warmth flickering across the walls. My mother brewed tea, and Dalton reviewed paperwork for the foundation. Outside, the world was still buzzing with my story, but inside, there was peace, or at least the beginning of it, because I realized something. Richard was wrong. Wolves hunt in packs, yes, but wolves fear fire, and I had become fire, not because of my money, but because I refused to let greed define me. 2 months later, my foundation officially opened its first women's shelter. Reporters came, flashing cameras, asking questions, but this time, the story wasn't about betrayal. It was about renewal. Children laughed in the background as volunteers handed out food and blankets. Mothers wept as they received keys to safe rooms. Doctors shook my hand, thanking me for funding clinics. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from Emily's venom, free from Mark's weakness, free from Richard's shadow. I wasn't just Evelyn Carter, the woman mocked on a hospital bed. I was Evelyn Carter, the woman who turned betrayal into blessing, pain into purpose, scars into strength. Months later, one last letter arrived. No name, no return address, just a single line written in careful, slanted handwriting. Kindness may have won this battle, but remember, Evelyn, battles never end. Be ready. I folded the letter slowly, my hands steady. Instead of fear, I felt something else. Resolve. Because maybe battles never end. Maybe storms always gather on the horizon. But storms do not frighten me anymore. I am the woman who walked through them, mocked, betrayed, plotted against, and came out standing taller. Let the wolves come. Let the storms rise. I will meet them with kindness in one hand and strength in the other. And I will not fall. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments. If you followed Evelyn's journey all the way here, hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear that kindness is power, and subscribe so you don't miss the next epic tale. The story of Evelyn Carter may end here, but her lesson will echo forever. Kindness is not weakness. It is fire, and fire cannot be mocked.